Okay, now we're going to get to our guest interview with Dr. Susan Yoon. Susan is a professor of learning sciences and science education. She is the PI or principal investigator for the Biograph project, and she's done a great amount of work on complex systems education. It fits right in with what we're interested in guts, and Susan has a very great background and experience teaching both complex systems and integrating modeling and simulation. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Irene.
You're welcome. Let me get back. And so, Susan, tell us more about yourself.
Well, first, should I tell us, or should I tell everybody our secret, Irene?
Sure.
Yeah, that we're like sisters from, like, we're born again sisters.
Yes.
Tell people that.
Separated.
Yeah, separated at birth, we're born again. Okay, so I'm just hearing a little bit of feedback, and I just wrote in the chat whether Sue Sue, are you on? Are you using headphones?
I am on, but I'll mute myself while you're talking and let's see if that helps.
Okay. Does
Better?
that I think so. Oh no, it's not. No. It's still there's still a little bit of feedback. But anyway. All right, so I'm an associate professor at the University of Pennsylvania, the Graduate School of Education. I study how teachers and students can use visualization tools to support their understanding and instruction in science. And I, as you said, Irene, I use complex systems as a lens to understand how students are working, but also I'm using complex systems as a conceptual framework for students for their learning. I also use social network analysis and social capital theories to support what students know and how they come to know it. And I've worked with various tools in this research. I've used handheld mobile tools, augmented reality technology, agent-based simulations like StarLogo, or only StarLogo, and also recently platforms for making apps. And I have a keen interest in helping students learn about science content, and especially how the content can support them in making informed decisions about how they experience the world, how they exist in the world, and how that impacts society.
Fantastic. Could you tell us a little bit more about some specifics of how you use modeling and simulation in the science classroom, or how you propose to?
So, as a science teacher way back when, I was always interested in using physical models. Back in the early 90s, we didn't really have digital tools to work with, but I always knew that science was really about making predictions, which necessitates running studies over a period of time so that you can discern the trends in the data. And I got really interested in complexity, which is all about understanding the concept of emergence. And that is the patterns that emerge after a period of time from lower level interactions to macro level outcomes and patterns that you can see. And then, I got interested in something called thinking tags. And that is Vanessa Colella was working on this. She was working with Mitchell Resnick at the time on her dissertation work. And she's the first author of the Adventures in Modeling book. I don't know whether any of your teachers use that book, but it's an oldie but goodie. And there, this idea of using simulations in the science classroom really mirrors the original interest that I had, which is about being able to make predictions about phenomenon. Science is explanatory, most definitely, right? So we want to explain things about how the world works, but it's really in an effort to understand how to make predictions and how to use those ideas in the next step, right? So if you think about climate change or the spread of disease, or how to make the Northeast power grid more robust in case we have a big attack. It's all about, well, what do we need to know about these systems so that we can live in the next moment in this world? And that's what simulations and models do, or digital simulations. They enable us to run, experiments over and over and over again that just physical experiments and models don't allow us to do. And so that's primarily my interest in why we should be using and promoting simulations in the science classroom.
Mm-hmm. Was it easy for you to make the transitions between, say, physical models and computer models both in your own experience as a science teacher and in teaching teachers how to transition between the two?
That's a good question. You know my story, Irene. Let me tell you a little bit about this logo story.
Okay.
So, I got interested in complex systems around, the late 90s. And I kind of came in by way of technological determinism and being anti-technological determinist, right? Jacques Ellul was the French philosopher who said that, technology is inevitable. We might as well just jump on the bandwagon. And at the time I was, and still am, very much interested in environmental sustainability and environmental education. And I thought, well, there are a whole bunch of problems that technology can actually get us into. And we ought to be a little more careful about the technological tools that we're advocating, because we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. It's hard to tell. And that got me thinking about this notion of hard to tell and how to understand phenomenon in the next step. This notion of emergence got me into complexity. And I got, and so anyway, this is not answering your question, but I kind of struggled with this. Okay, we need to be thinking about how to make predictions and understand emergence. And physical models, as I said earlier, just provide limitations for that to happen. And so then I was forced to confront this notion of what are the best ways to understand emergence. And then I discovered Star Logo. And all of the people who will be listening to this webcast will know what I'm talking about. And so I went to I was a participant in a workshop at the Santa Fe Institute in the summer of 2001, I think, right? I think, Irene, were you part of that?
I think so.
And I was interesting story. When I went to that workshop, I had just finished coming out of the classroom in 1999. I was, a part-time doctoral student that became a full-time doctoral student in 2000 or so. And I still hadn't made that transition, between the sort of physical models and the digital tools. So I got into that workshop and I was looking at what was going on. And I was a little bit alarmed. I don't know whether you remember, Irene, I was a little bit belligerent. I was saying, like, how are you going to get teachers to learn this? I mean, this is a little bit nuts. You want people to program? Like, how is that possible? Nobody knows how to, put logic together and whatever. And, that came from my own deep-seated, not dislike, but, possibly an insecurity. Like, I am just not a good programmer. Right? Like, I never have. I've shied away from it. And I say, Irene, how do you program this? And although I have myself had issues or problems with programming, what I've seen working for years, more than a decade now with teachers who do this and students who do this, and also with the new kinds of graphical programming interfaces that are, available with Star Logo Nova, App Inventor, Alice, these Scratch, right? That it just is increasingly more, it's increasingly easier to be able to construct a simulation using those, block-based programming languages. So, again, I've my transition has been a little bit harder because I was sort of old, an old timer, an old timer. I still am an old timer, but anyway, but I think that teachers are just finding it easier. Teachers and students are just finding it easier to embrace this.
Mm-hmm. I think with the onset of NGSS and the emphasis on modeling, I was attempting to try to bridge, the use of models in the classroom and now computational models in the classroom. But what I'm finding talking to many teachers is that there wasn't that much integration of physical models and models anyway. So it's not as if we can go sideways. We still have to build up a big understanding of what models are and what they're capable of before we take a sidestep into computational models.
I think that's actually absolutely 100% right. I totally agree with that. I was more in, thinking about sort of philosophical and epistemological ways of representing science. And it was a little bit different than others in my, as a science chair, working with teachers. I agree that the notion of modeling is not prevalent in terms of activities in classrooms. It wasn't then, it still isn't now. But with the next generation science standards, there are some problems with the next generation science standards. But, that aspect of science, I think they got right? That it's science is about making models.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's reassuring to hear that you see the same in the population of teachers.
Yeah. I just want to say that, so I also teach pre-service science education to high school science teachers. And I'll tell you a little story about where that, the photo that you have of me, where that awful photo, where that comes from. I'll tell you that story a little later, but
I happen to like that photo.
Oh, that's an awful photo. My hands are disheveled. Oh my God.
No, it's an action shot, and it represents, you're very thoughtful before you speak. And I see that in that photo.
Oh, good. Oh, that's so nice. That's so nice of you to say, Larry. Anyway, but that so I'm in the science methods class there, where we're science teachers, and we spend a good deal of time talking about modeling and why that's important and how we ought to be using models to gather evidence to make decisions. And and those kinds of evidence are, hopefully not necessarily irrefutable, but it provides more, those models provide more evidence that students can use to make decisions. So I've repeated myself there, but that all that to say, we do emphasize quite a bit in the next generation of teachers in my classroom, the kinds of edicts that the next generation science standards have given to us.
Mm-hmm. So Susan, can we talk a little bit about Biograph now? And can you tell us about the project and maybe what its goals were? What were some of the outcomes that you thought were helpful for this community? Mm-hmm.
Right. So Biograph was a 5-year design and development project we worked with. In the first year, we were pilot testing some of the resources that we created with 4 teachers. I'll get to the resources that we created in a moment, but and then in the second 2 years, we worked with it was a 4-year project. Second 2 years, we worked with 10 teachers in a sequence of professional development over 2 years, same 10 teachers. And we basically told NSF that we were going to be creating 5 units in biology that were amenable to different forms of complex systems and illustrated how systems work. So the hypothesis is that, so here's the problem with biology, broadly speaking. We teach biology in a very atomistic way. So we teach evolution, then we teach ecology, and then we teach things like protein synthesis, or we teach, properties of matter. But what we don't do very well, and this not teaching well is highly supported by, high school textbooks, biology textbooks. What we don't do well is teach how all of these topics work together in biology to understand how living systems operate and are integrated with non-living systems. And our hypothesis was that if we could build units around notions of complexity, like self-organization, feedback, robustness, and random variation, that students would be able to see how these biology topics are connected. And so we built these units, these simulations using StarLogo Nova. We had worksheets, like student work activity packets that worked in conjunction with the simulations, as well as teacher guides. And I think that your group of teachers have access to all those. Mm-hmm. In these resources, we built in things that we know about how students learn best, right? So we know that knowledge is built through discursive interaction. And so we incorporated scientific argumentation. We also know that students need to perform experiments and have hands-on interactive experiences. And so we had various prompts to help students, manipulate the simulations. And we also know that not just through argumentation, but through collaborative knowledge building, where students will offer their results in a whole class way that gets visualized through graphs and etc. When the teacher can demonstrate how scientific knowledge often becomes it's not an average, but it's a repeated measure of evidence that's collected. And so we built all these together into these units and measured whether students learned anything. And it turns out they did. It turns out that students' understanding of biology and complexity came out to be about 3 times the amount of what students would normally learn moving from 9th to 10th grade in science. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful that you have shared your resources with our community and become part of the community. And I think I hope many of our teachers will check it out. It's a slightly different approach. It's not as much programming centric, but I think it is extremely content rich, right, Susan?
Right. It's very content rich. We do have one unit called Building a Pond Ecosystem mm-hmm. that works in conjunction with the other units. That's the 6th unit. That's all about building or constructing models. And I think that there are at least 2 of the units that have extensions where students are building, or adding or modifying, going into the back end of the simulation and modifying the simulation to make things look different, on the simulation. So
right. Did you find that the 6th module or unit was difficult for teachers to transition to, or through the other units, did they become a little more accustomed to understanding code, and thus the 6th unit was not as big of a hurdle?
Well, when we introduced, we always had we always had, planned to introduce programming that was going to be part of Biograph, because we also hypothesized that it's really in the making of a simulation where you have to understand the variables, you have to figure out all the different parameters for the variables themselves, and then how they interact with each other, and then how they interact in the environment. Programming those things really forces people to learn about those variables. And so we thought that the scientific understanding and the complex systems understanding would greatly improve if you're making or constructing a model rather than just simply using it. And so we'd always planned for that to happen. Now, you have to start with, well, here's a simulation, and this is what complexity is, and you should play around with this a little bit, so there's this developmental trajectory that you have to be mindful of with teachers. And so, we started the first year with that, about half a semester, half a year. The teacher professional development in the summer was really based on using simulations rather than making simulations, although we did have them make some as well. But midway through the first year, we said, all right, so now we should start, now that they're pretty comfortable with using the simulations, let's do some professional development on making. And I was really surprised that of teachers' responses to this, right? These are self-selected teachers coming to MIT, really, cutting edge teachers in their classroom, and really amenable to new kinds of pedagogical experiences and approaches. And what we found was that our set of these avant-garde teachers were saying, we don't see the relevance of having a program in science. Why would we need to do this? I don't think students are going to be able to do that, was one of their arguments. And also they said, this is in the realm of computer science, which belongs down the hall in the computer science classroom. And, there were various other arguments, right? Which is like, this is time consuming, and, again, this the student level, their abilities, and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so we had to go to work on teacher beliefs. So in science education research, teacher beliefs is just a really, really robust area of research. And one of the things that we did not do is work with teachers on their beliefs about how computation belongs in science. And of course, mathematical computation always worked with science, right? And so they could actually see the connection with mathematical computation in science. But computation, as in computation using computers and computational thinking, was more of a tough sell. Anyway, so we had them read Why Model by Joshua Epstein. We had experts come in to talk about how they're computational biologists, and basically they can't do biology and science without, constructing models themselves and learning how to program. And we also had, we also, had to take out the next generation science standards and say, this is not really far off from what we're asking you, what next generation science standards are asking you to do. They're asking you to help your students learn about computational thinking as well. And so, it was like this orchestrated way of thinking about, or helping teachers move in the way that they think about using or making in science. And we were very successful. I mean, at that, by the end of the second year, one of our star teachers, who was actually the most vociferous about how computational thinking doesn't belong in science, in that first PD, I interviewed him in the exit interview, and I had asked him. I said, you were adamant about the fact that this doesn't belong in science, and it was going to be hard for your students to do it. And I said, do you still think that? And he said, absolutely not. He says, critical to biology. And it also happened to be that his students, when I introduced his students, unbeknownst to him, which I later told him, they had for their science fair project made a model of, and I don't remember what it was, but they on their own, his students, went under the hood and figured out how to program.
Fabulous.
Science fair project, and they were all sold already. They were all bought in already before he was. So
that's a fabulous story. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's exciting to you about the future of science education?
So what excites me the most also makes me nervous. And that has to do with the prevalence of science, these naysayers in the population that say that science is fake or it doesn't help us. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really a big challenge for all of us to help students make evidence-based decisions about how to live in this world. And what excites me is that it turns out that now more than ever, we have the tools to help students collect evidence and make those informed decisions. So that, picture there is a photo from a Philadelphia Inquirer. It's our Philadelphia's newspaper. It's a story that they did on how we work with how teachers are finding it harder to teach about science because of this fake science phenomenon. And one student in my class came in one day and said, I don't know what to do about this issue. We have this problems of practice activity that we do before during every class. And he said, my students came in and they said, so-and-so basketball player says the earth is flat.
Right.
And and despite this is a student talking now, student teacher, and he said, despite my best efforts, I used videos, I used stories, I used anecdotes, I used all sorts of things. Despite my best efforts, they still said, well, my basketball hero says the earth is flat, so the earth must be flat. And this is the same issue we have with intelligent design and, vaccinations, or the thing that is most high in the air right now, which is, climate change. Mm-hmm. And, this, I think, is a super important thing that we need to be thinking about as science teachers. How do we help students understand science and the robust methods that get us to understanding phenomenon in particular ways? And just before this call, actually, I was listening to NPR and the 1A show that's hosted by Joshua Johnson. And he was interviewing Alan Alda and his new book, and it's called If I Understood You, Would I Have This Look on My Face? My Adventures in the Art and Science of Relating and Communicating. And, in the interview, he was talking about how he'd worked with scientists from Stony Brook, and many scientists, and how how important it was, or it will be, for scientists to make their work intelligible, and not just intelligible, but believable to a population. And Irene, just before this this call, we as in you and me and the rest of the Biograph team, were trying to figure out how to write an NSF news brief or an abstract, right? And the direction to us was you have to make in very non-technical way, you have to make what you're trying to do in this project intelligible to a population, just to a regular population. And so all that to say, I think teachers and researchers in education, science education, have a big stake in this game. And it's really our duty to help students understand the practices of science and how it applies to their everyday life. And Alan Alda was talking about how to do this. And one way to do this is not to judge students as they come in and they say, well, you're dumb if you think the earth is flat. No, you really have to understand where they're coming from. And we call that, situated learning. Where are they coming from? Of course, their icon is going to have some influence over them, or their parents, that they trust their lives to, will have some influence over them in terms of what they believe. And we have to work with that perspective in a respectful way to move them along in thinking about how science works. And so I think that's important. And I just have one of the biggest things that one of my favorite quotes is from Joseph Rotblat, who is he was a nuclear physicist and a particle nuclear physicist. He was working on the Manhattan Project when they were developing the atomic bomb. He's the only scientist who actually left the project because he could foresee how this technology was going to impact the world. And he left science altogether and he became an advocate. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts in trying to work with scientists to be more responsible about their work. And so he writes in one of this great article, he says, scientists must accept responsibility for the social and moral consequences of their work. They should always be guided by ethical principles. The science teachers should draw attention to the universal nature of scientific research and to the global impact of its applications, making it necessary for everybody to think and act as a citizen of the world community. And so I think that we all have a stake in this game, and it's important.
Super, thank you, Susan. Yeah, at some other point, I'd like to have a discussion with you about faith and science. Like that's where I get derailed when you could say science is like a religion, but maybe not. But when I come up against faith and someone's belief is faith-based, I don't know how to deal with that. Or I don't I don't know the conversation.
Well, in that article in the Inquirer, there were all sorts of responses to that article, right? And they were making me actually a little bit crazy. One of the comments from one of the readers said, science is the left's religion. And, it's really hard. I agree. It is really, really hard to help people see. And, and I said, I'm a very, I'm Christian, strongly Christian. Mm-hmm. And the last line of that article, I say, I believe in science and I believe in God and religion. Mm-hmm. And, I use different standards of evidence for both. And they coexist in my life. Mm-hmm. And, if you read the book called The Language of God by Francis Collins, Frank Collins, they call him, Francis Collins is his official name. No, he was the director of NIH. And also, talks about in this book how science and religion coexist in his life. And I think that it's important to reveal or talk about the different ways that we believe, in evidence or in ideas. Mm-hmm. And that it's okay to have different ways to do that. That science uses a particular method, a particular language that supports an understanding of science. And so does religion or Christianity or whatever you want to insert there as your faith base. So, and they don't need to compete.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we'll continue this some evening. Anyway, can you tell me what's about an inspiring CT project or effort that you've been involved with? Is there?
So I will tell you a little story about, so I also teach a course called Design of Learning Environments. And it's mainly master students who take the course, but we have a smattering of doctoral students who also take the course. And so in this, the design of learning environments, it's really the subtext is design of digital learning environments. Mm-hmm. And after one of my classes early in the semester, in the fall semester of 2015, one of my students came to me and said, she's a master's student, she said, I love listening to all this work that you've done, you know, in these simulations and augmented reality. And she said, is there a project that you're working on right now that I can participate in? And I said, no, well, we don't really work with master's students, you know, our doctoral students are funded, but I have this idea that I would like to write about in a grant and get a grant, a small grant to start. And so I explained what it was to her. And, you know, my interests, again, are in, you know, not surprisingly, as I read to you from Joseph Rotblatt, you know, my interests are really heavily based in socioscientific issues and how we make ethical decisions. And so I explained to her, I would like for students to learn about how to make apps, mobile apps on mobile phones or mobile tablets to solve problems that they find in their local environment that have a socioscientific nature. So, you know, maybe it's recycling, or that there's, you know, we're in a highly urban area, so maybe there's this issue of the food desert and finding a way to get fresh fruit, or you know, thinking about how, you know, air quality or whatever. I was really interested in that. And the idea that students would have agency that is developed because of their motivation to build an app, to program an app. And so she said, so she came to that initial meeting. In the second meeting, she brought another student who is also in the class. And she said, oh, this is a second student now. She said, are you talking about App Inventor? And I said, yeah, I'm talking about App Inventor. And of course, you know, Irene, that App Inventor also uses the same kind of block-based programming, graphical programming, similar to Scratch and StarLogo Nova. And it also is, you know, emerges from research at MIT and Hal Abelson's group at CSAIL. And she said, you know, I know something about App Inventor. And I said, okay, that's great. And she pulls out of her book bag 2 textbooks that she'd written on how to program an App Inventor, the Korean language. And she puts them on my desk. And I'm looking at her and I said, well, so you just fell out of the sky from God to me. Thank you so much. And so we three, you know, have worked, and you've met them, Irene, Nora, and Juan. So we three have been working on this project for the last 1.5 years. And we've been investigating all sorts of issues about, you know, as you know, I've had many discussions with you about it, you know, how to get basically students to collaborate on the app, because it's hard to do that, the pair programming. Mm-hmm. How do we actually get students to be interested in socioscientific issues once they figured out that they could build an app? Because, you know, when you start talking about building apps, that's all they can think about, you know. And then how, there's anyway, many things that we've been talking about. And then we got a bunch of grants. Actually, we got 3 grants, small grants, to work with teachers and teacher professional development. And you know, we used all these like smaller grants as seed grants to put in a bigger grant for NSF with the center, the Institute for Biomedical Informatics at Penn. And so the thing about biomedical informatics and just informatics in general is that it's the promise of big data is at the core of their work. And the idea of, and they're working with, Perelman School of Medicine. So this is a really, this is a big deal center. And, they have core interests in helping the public use data and read data and patterns to help them, again, make decisions. This seems to be like the key word today is decision making. Anyway, and so we put in this big grant, and we're excited about it. Hopefully it'll get funded. But I think that this combination of socioscientific issues, scientific knowledge, student learning, and being able to create or make an app that will support their agency and their local community, I think this is like super exciting to me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that's my little story about App Inventor.
Oh, that's wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I think we both like working in community or with students who are learning to both understand their community in scientific ways and try to impact their community.
That's right.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, thank you so much. It's been great spending time with you as always. Let me just summarize that we have we've uploaded the Biograph resources. I know there's the evolution module, sugar transport, gene regulation, and enzymes. Sue, are there others that I'm not naming?
There's also the last one you talked about, the pond ecosystem.
Fabulous. And I, strongly encourage members of the community to check those out and seriously consider using them in your classroom. So thank you, Susan. Stacy or Sue, do you have any comments for Susan or questions?
I'm really encouraged by what we've been creating recently. And Susan helped kind of solidify my thinking a lot on making predictions. I mean, a lot of the lessons that we're creating, there's a huge emphasis on making predictions. And so I'm glad you said that today because I feel better about the direction we're headed.
Phil Sadler is a scientist at the Harvard Smithsonian Astrophysics Institution. I can't remember the full name, but anyway, he wrote, or he did a series of Annenberg-supported videos on misconceptions. And so I don't know if you've seen this. The series is called Private Universe or Minds of Their Own. And if you go on the Annenberg, you just type in Phil Sadler and Annenberg Center, you can pull up those videos. They're so great. And I use them in instruction all the time. Okay. And in one of the videos, Phil Sadler is being interviewed, and he said, science is about making predictions. It's not about explaining. It's not, I don't know how he said it. It's not just about, although I think I'm inserting the word just there, but it's not about create or making explanations. It's about prediction. And that was, I mean, those videos have been around for years, and I think I got that idea from him years ago. And when I first heard it, I thought, no, we do a lot in terms of understanding the black box of science, right? And layering on our interpretation of how we think the world is ordered. And I, over time, I came to understand that when we teach that it's just about explaining scientific phenomenon or the way that the world operates, that's not enough, right? That is not enough, and we stop there often in K-12 science. What scientists really do in their research is about making predictions. And And that's where we ought to get our students to go.
That's great. Thank you. Quick question for you. One of the comments you made was that we should be using models to make decisions. And you mentioned the Why Model article, which I have access to. Are there any other articles or books that you can think that might be useful for me to use in teacher workshops?
No, but I will tell you one thing that I've used that's been very successful. Her name, she is a vice president at the Santa Fe Institute. Her name is Stephanie
Forrest.
Not Stephanie Forrest. No.
Oh, no.
It's not Stephanie. It's a different name. She's a vice president, Irene. I'll think of her name. And if I think of her name, Dunn?
Jennifer Dunn.
Jennifer Dunn. Is it
Yes.
Jennifer Dunn?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. She's a vice president, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
There is a video that she talks about. In this video, it's a lecture series. And the lecture is introduced by David Krakauer. And in that lecture, she demonstrates some of the research that she's done, where she talks about patterns in different kinds of ecosystems. And, so they collect data and then they model it. So they create graphs of different, and this is predator-prey models. And so they're showing in this, if I'm correct, that the pattern, it's kind of a logarithmic pattern of the different kinds of numbers of prey that certain predators have. So there are some predators that they only eat one thing, right? Pandas only eat bamboo. And there are other predators that eat lots of different prey. Anyway, so what they do is they show this on a graph, like the ratio of these kinds of predators. And what she shows is that it doesn't matter what ecosystem you're looking at. The pattern, and she overlays those graphs on top of each other. The pattern is the same. That there's a certain number of predators that eat only one thing. And then there are a certain number of predators that eat more and more and more. And, when in that segment of video, watching that, it's so clear why it's important to model.
That's perfect.
Because you couldn't even imagine that that those patterns could be so similar in different ecosystems.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'll go look for that immediately.
Go look for that. And I can't promise to send you the link or anything right now because I am really, really under the gun right now to get a bunch of stuff done, running a big conference in a week or so. And so, but in the future, I will make this promise that I will get you the link.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sue, I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about our website. Up to you whether you have time to stay on or not.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, that was for Susan.
Oh, Susan.
Susan.
You know what? I am going to go.
Okay.
Just because I'm going to, just lots of things going on. But
Yes, I understand.
It's a real pleasure to meet with you guys and chat a little bit.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Susan.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, moving on. Just wanted to go over some new, hello, Josh. Some new elements of our Teachers with Guts network. So one thing is we have a discussion that was introduced by Andy Rasmussen of Chicago Public Schools. And he wanted to get some feedback from our teachers on how they are finding learning and integrating GUTS modules. Especially he wants to hear from teachers who do not have previous experience in computer science or are new to teaching. So I posted, no, this is just an image showing where this discussion is. It's under experiences for new CS teachers and or new teachers. So if you have time, please follow up with Andy. Also, I wanted to show that we had new teacher contributed resources on our website. So Christy from New Mexico uploaded her science concepts and vocabulary that transition students and teachers from the code.org courses to Star Logo Nova. And I find those will be very helpful. And then we have Christian Rizzi, who is our colleague in Argentina. And he has posted a number of reference sheets and translations of our materials into Spanish. So I only listed a few there, but there are many more. So if that's an interest or need in your community, please use those. In news, let's see, there's a new magazine that's out for computing educators. And I shouldn't say not only computing educators, I think it will appeal and serve the needs of teachers who are not primarily CS, but are doing some CS. And then there was also an interesting article on computational thinking by a fellow named Peter Denning, and those have been posted. Excuse me. We have a number of upcoming events. Currently, we're running a MOOC with a number of facilitators. And also there are workshops coming up in Austin, Texas. That's the We Teach CS. We have the face-to-face 2-week workshop intensive in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We have a short workshop in Riverside and another in Indianapolis, all in the month of June. So it's going to be very busy. In the practice section, we've revised the right rail. So now for the CS and science people, and those coming in from code.org, their easy, medium, and hard challenges for physical life and earth science are easy to find now by clicking on these links. We've also put together all of the Star Logo challenges that are used in Module 1 and elsewhere. And then we have an area that has specific links to building challenges that are part of our 2017 MOOC. Sue, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No.
Okay. And then finally, we want to say thanks to you for joining the Teachers with Guts workshop, website. If you haven't already, please update your profile and add an avatar or a photo. It doesn't have to be your photo. You can pick an animal or something. And if you have suggestions, please email me, ialee@mit.edu, or also info@projectguts.org. We're really working to bring communities together to use this website. And thank you both, Stacy, for being here representing the Missouri Botanical Garden, and Josh, who's also doing some work with Code VA. Great to have you guys here.
Sorry I couldn't be here sooner. There was class.
I know. Some people are still in school. Our next meeting will be on July 5th. I think we'll probably go for an evening time, and I'll send out a reminder about that.
Okay.
And as always, give us your feedback. And if you have suggestions on what to offer in future webinars, let us know. Okay, thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Susan Yoon as much as I did. And thanks for being here with us.
Thanks, Irene.
Thank you, Irene.
Good seeing y'all.
Okay.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.